Okay, so this little video, we're going to just be going over the CSS box model mostly. We're also going to be reviewing some HTML and then a little bit of CSS styling, but mainly just focused around how the CSS box model operates and how you can manipulate it and how it is essentially the entire model for any HTML web page. Generally, checking out this diagram we got here, you've got it broken down into 4 separate parts. You've got the margin, the border, the padding, and then the content. And the content's represented as what the user is going to see. In addition to being able to add more HTML tags within the content, which won't show up as HTML tags, but the content within it will show up. I think the best way to go over this is to just kind of code out a little demo. So I'm just going to walk through that process real quick. I'm going to create a folder on my desktop here. Let's name it. No, doesn't want to. CSS box model. Here we go. Now I don't have anything in this folder right now, but I'm just going to use it as the launch off point to open VS Code. So I'm going to open VS Code. Mac, I can just do Command spacebar and launch VS Code from there. You can see right now I don't have any folders in my workspace. I'm going to clear this little welcome screen. So there's a few ways to add this folder. One, you can go to File, Add Folder to Workspace, like that. We'll go ahead and do it that way. I also just could have clicked that button that this is hiding now. So it's in my desktop CSS box model. We'll add it there. And first thing you want to do is add our initial index.html file. And again, a few ways to do that. You right click, new file. You can go up, file, new file. But this got this little icon right here, which is quick and easy. So I'll click it, index.html. All right. Now I've got this handy dandy little shortcut tool for VS Code. You type in exclamation mark and there's an autocomplete. It's called a snippet. And you press enter. We've just got the base code that we need to get our HTML file up and running. Since we're talking about something specific, we don't need to go through that right now. What we really want to focus on is the body right here. This is everything that we're going to be working on. It's going to get displayed on the actual browser. It's going to come out of there. Remember, every time you see the white little dot up here, you want to make sure to save it. Get in the habit of doing Command+S, which will automatically save every page you're on. So I got some notes here. Then I'm going to keep going for these shortcuts, and I'll add these with this video as well, link to it or something. And so Windows command is equal to control, right? So exclamation mark, press enter, autofills base.html code, Command+S equals save. So remember, the important things are knowing where your code is, where the files are. We're just going to keep it here for now. We might move it later, but we can see that the index file has been created. So now we can mostly just work out of our index.html on our VS Code. Okay, but if we lose where it is, always remember where it is saved on your computer. You can right click and reveal in Finder. Okay, and it'll pull up wherever we've located it. So if you lose it, that's a quick way to do it. Now we want to open this in a browser. So again, we can reveal in the Finder here, double click, and it should open in a browser. Looks like an external monitor right now, and I want it to open up over there. So we got it there. You can also right click in, copy path, same location. Now there's nothing showing up here because we haven't wrote any code for the user yet. So every tag in HTML follows this box model. So the body follows the box model. So if we write something in here, okay, hello, and save it, and then refresh our page, right, we can see, okay, hello, within the body. Now, if we wanted to add another element within the body element, like a div, okay, I'm from the div. Refresh the page here, and we can see that that content was also added to the HTML page. But we had okay, hello, and then we wrote a div, but it didn't display the div because the browser recognizes that as a tool to tell it what to do rather than to show it. So these don't get shown, only the content within it. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to be working from this one div to kind of represent our box model going forward. So what I need to do now is I need to add some CSS to it. And I could write the CSS on this same page, but I'm actually going to add a CSS style sheet to the header here and write it on a separate page. So the shortcut for that in VS Code is you just type in link, and you can see it pops up, right? Emmet abbreviation lets us know that that's going to be an abbreviation for a link. And these will usually autofill with what we need. Now remember, always do the path written in the href, not the rel. That's telling us what type of document this is. And so we haven't actually created the sheet yet, but we're going to call it what we reference it here. So let's just call it style.css. Okay, now it doesn't exist yet, so let's save this. Go back up here, click our new file to create a new file. We'll call this style.css. Now remember, if you put this inside of a folder, you would need to reference it within that folder here. So I'm actually going to do that to illustrate that point. So let's add the folder to the workspace. Whoop. Did not mean to do that. What I meant to do is new folder. Okay, so we'll just call this CSS because we're going to put all of our CSS in there. Now I can just click this CSS, drag it in. It's going to make sure I want to do this. So yeah. Okay, so now it's actually in the CSS folder. So since I did that, I need to tell this HTML file to look into the CSS folder before grabbing this CSS file. Okay, so let's add some CSS code. I'm just going to keep this as a div for right now. We might change the way that we select it in a bit, but let's just open it as a div. So all the divs at this point will follow the CSS rules that we write going forward. So the first way we can illustrate what the CSS box model really looks like is by adding a background color. White is default, but since it's white on white, we can't tell where the actual margins in the background color are located. So we'll just do this as green here. Remember, it's very sensitive. You want to have your semicolon after your CSS property, then you have your property value followed by a colon. And then remember, this is our selector where we've got an open and closed braces, which contain all of our CSS properties that we're declaring in here. So we could also add a margin to our div selector. Well, we're going to make this 10 pixels. We kind of want this to be big. So what that means is that left, right, top, bottom, they're all going to be 10 pixels. So let's save it, refresh this page. Okay, so remember, in our HTML, we removed that initial content. So now you can see the entirety of this div represented by the background color and then the content within it. And you can also see that there's space around the edge, about 10 pixels or so, that was created when we changed the margin to 10 pixels. So if we change this margin to 20 pixels, not W pixels, we're going to get even more space around here. Now, I'm going to actually do Command+B. So Command+B will hide your project folder. And if you do it again, it'll unhide it. So you can toggle it back and forth. Just give us a little bit more room to work with on this screen so you can kind of see what we're dealing with. I also want to give this div a font size. Just want to make it bigger so you can see the text. So we'll make the font size 30 pixels. Save it, refresh it. Okay, see it a little better. Now let's make the color of the font, which is just in CSS represented as color. So that's real easy. I'll make it white so it stands out on that green a little better. Okay. So we've got our white text on our green background there. And as you can see, we have space around the margin. What I want to do is copy this div. Remember when we first made it, it did not look like much. It's just normal text. So this is div 2. Let's call this one div 2. I'm the div 1, and then we got div 2 down here. So now you can see that this selector is selecting all of the divs. So if we change this from div to body, it would be selecting the body. And then you can see it was applied to the body, so the background is green. And because font sizes are carried to the children, our font size remains 30 pixels. Let's go back to just doing this as a div. So again, make it the padding more. We can see it, push it more. Now let's talk about the margin. Oop, no margin already. How about the padding? Padding, we've behaved similar to the way the margin does, except the padding is within the element itself. So if I add 30 pixels here, it's not going to add it to the outside. It's going to add it to the inside before the content. So you get content here, and now this area, 30 pixels around, is represented by the padding, which the background color occupies. And then the area on the outside represents the margin. So again, if we keep making this bigger, we're going to get more padding, more and more padding. So we have our content, which is our font size and our actual text that we wrote into the div itself, represented at this level. And then we have the padding at the next level, and then the margin on the outside. So you kind of take a mental shot of this right here. Let's go back to the... We can kind of see this model being played out in our example code. One thing we're missing is the border. The border is the border between the padding and the margin. Let's see how we do this. Okay, border. Now border takes a couple more values than most of the CSS properties do. You first want to tell it what type of border it is. And there's a lot of different borders. So what I'm going to go to is border CSS. Just search that simply. And then CSS borders in W3 Schools is a good resource. And we can see here is a lot of information about different types of borders you can use. You've got dotted borders, dash borders, solid borders, double borders, groove borders, ridge borders. So if you mess with those and change them, you'll see the different types. So that's the first value that you need to put when you have a border property. So we'll do solid, see what that looks like. We'll save it. We'll refresh it. Okay, so what happened there is we saw a little shift, but we didn't actually tell the border what size to be or what color to be. So let's go back to our little helpful resource here, W3 Schools, and let's see if they have an example that'll show us how we can implement size and color. So here's the examples of the borders. Now those are black, so we don't have that yet. Let's see if we've got some. So border style is represented as solid. Border width is represented as 5 pixels. So here we say we just did border. We didn't necessarily specify what about the border we wanted to change. So I'm going to note that out because I want to save that for later. But let's just copy border style, solid, and then border width 5 pixels. Paste that into here. Save that, go back to our document, refresh it. Again, we saw a little shift, but we didn't see any changes. We might have gone from that one default, maybe 1 pixel, and then it shifted a little bit more there. So it looks like maybe we need something in addition to border style and border width. Okay, so now there's a different color. Okay, so border color. That's what we need. Let's copy that guy. We'll paste it in here. We'll just leave it red for the example. Back. All right, there it is. Now we see our border red showing up against our green background here. Now we can make that a little bigger. And that is a very noisy color going on there. So let's change that to brown, a little easier on the eyes. Okay, now we should be able to kind of see our content there. Then we've got our padding as green, our border represented as red, and our margin on the outside, which actually isn't the element itself, it's just what the element is pushing against other elements. A really good way to kind of see this in action is to use the developer tools. We got Chrome, and the developer tools are located under View, Developer. So we can view the source, developer tools, and JavaScript console. So developer tools there. So that opened up in the console, but we might want to click the element here. So now when we hover over these individual elements, you also might have to click this little box here. We can see the entire box model by clicking it, represented kind of as an overlay over it. But also, if you scroll down on this side where you have got your styles toggled, you can actually see each element by hovering over it individually. So you've got your content, your padding, your border, and your margin. This guy as well, on the bottom there, is kind of hidden by clicking on the elements within the code right here. All right, let's go back to where I just had border solid right here. And one of the things you can do to kind of save yourself some space of code that's taking up, and just make it a little easier, you can actually write these 3 values shorthand in one border tag. And the order is similar to style, width, and color. 15 pixels, brown. Now, I'm not sure if this is the way that it actually is supposed to be ordered. So, good way to find out. Let's just save it and test it. All right, refresh it. And that looks to be the case. So we got the type of border, solid, generally what you're going to use, 15 pixels, and then brown. Let's try another style. Let's look at dotted. Now, you might not ever find yourself wanting to use these. Just type it in. But there it is. You've got your little red dots going around the border. One thing to notice is that the background color for the border continues to the edge of where the margin starts. So it's good to remember that the background color occupies the content, the border, the padding, the border, but not the margin. So my background color is kind of a good tool to use when you're sort of trying to figure out where your elements are located, because it'll kind of give you a visual of kind of what area it's taking up and what elements are within it, which is a useful tool sort of for debugging purposes, even if you don't use it ultimately for your design. All right, so let's just recap real quick here. We've got our CSS box model. It's represented by 4 parts. The margin on the outside, sort of separating it from other elements, margins. Then you've got the border, and then you've got the padding, and then you've got the content. And then the content is what the user is going to see, and also where you can put additional nested HTML elements. All right, this is it for this video. Go ahead and walk through this, see if you can replicate what I've done here, add some more styles, maybe even try a nested element in there. Good luck.